Now, a presidential election is to be held in Syria in June. Despite the civil war, President Assad is expected to seek a third 7-year term. Well, with me now is the journalist and Syrian analyst Sakhr Al-Makhadhi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we'll talk about the elections in a moment. But first of all, we've had the State Department tonight saying that it is investigating what it believes is an attack with a chemical weapon, probably chlorine. What do you make of this?
Well, we had been hearing about these reports of chemical weapons, chlorine attacks across Syria, and what was remarkable is how widespread these reports were. You know, we had reports from Homs, from Hama, from Idlib, from the suburbs of Damascus, from Harasta, from Jobar in eastern and northeastern Damascus, so really across the country. And what's interesting about this is the timing, because we're in the final stages of the UN's attempts to remove all chemical weapons from Syria by April the 30th. So there are just 2 weeks to go. It looks like the deadline may be missed, but, you know, 80% of those chemical weapons have already been removed. And if this is, as it looks like, the regime using chemical weapons in these final stages, then it would be certainly significant to those attempts to clear the country of those weapons.
And chlorine would fall within the parameters of the chemical weapons which Assad has been ordered to destroy.
It would. It's interesting because chlorine is not in itself necessarily a chemical weapon, but it can be used for military purposes. And of course, chlorine is not outlawed, but its use as a weapon of war is certainly outlawed. It's a very cheap weapon to produce. It can be produced even after the country had been declared clear of chemical weapons. And it's not very militarily significant. It's not the most potent chemical weapon. So this would be, it would seem to be an attempt to use chemical weapons to scare and terrorize the population, if indeed it is the regime doing this, in the dying stages of the government's chemical weapons capability.
Now, what about this announcement of elections? Rarely can such an announcement have attracted quite so much criticism. Both the UN, the Foreign Office here, all saying that these are simply not going to be credible given a situation where so many people are displaced and tens of thousands have been killed.
Exactly. And the regime has no intention of making this a credible, free and fair election. There are no election observers. It is indeed the first time that it's going to be a multi-candidate election, which is likely to mean that regime-tolerated candidates who may rack up 5 or 10% of the vote will be allowed to stand. The restrictions on those candidates, on people who are allowed to stand, though, are significant. You know, they have to have been living in Syria for the past 10 years. They cannot have any dual citizenship. And what that means is that it excludes all possible contenders from the opposition.
And just very briefly, given the grip that Assad still has on at least parts of the country, is it likely that he will use this to reinforce his position? Is he going to emerge claiming at least a victory?
I think what this is a celebration of Bashar al-Assad's continuing rule over Syria. This is a celebration of the fact that he hasn't fallen and that his position looks stronger, far, far more strong than it did 18 months ago. This is a celebration of the fact that he's still standing and is dominating the country militarily.
Okay, Sakhr Al-Makhadhi, thank you very much indeed for joining us.